It was on an apparently ordinary night in San Diego that my life completely changed. My name's Ethan, I'm 38, and I've been working as a crane operator at the port for over a decade. The recent divorce left me adrift, seeking refuge in long hours of solitary work, suspended between the sky and the sea. Isolation became my constant companion. I kind of liked the sensitivity I developed when handling huge loads with the precision of a surgeon. It's funny how this job taught me about balance, not just of the loads, but of life itself. That specific night, something in the air felt different. The salty wind carried an omen I still didn't understand. Had I known that two Navy officers were about to challenge everything I thought about myself, maybe I would have chosen a different bar to drown my sorrows. If this story has already caught your interest, hit like, you won't regret what's coming. The San Diego Naval Base dominates the landscape I see every day from up on my crane. The smell of metal mixed with sea salt fills the air as I lift containers under the scorching California sun. My routine is set. I wake up at 5 a.m., have a strong black coffee on the deck of my trailer parked near the port, and climb up to my lonely cabin. From up high, I watch the military doing their morning exercises at the base. It's funny how I started memorizing their schedules, formations, and rituals, especially of the elite group training near Pier 39. That Friday, working a double shift left me exhausted. For once, I decided to stop by O'Malley's, a quiet bar mostly frequented by military guys. I just wanted a cold beer before heading back to my trailer. That's when they walked in. Maxwell and Callum, as I later found out, were part of the Navy elite I'd been watching from my crane every day. Maxwell, bald and imposing, commanded attention effortlessly. His green eyes contrasted with his stern expression. Callum, a bit shorter but just as athletic, had an easy smile that hid a calculated intensity in his gestures. I noticed them looking my way as they ordered their drinks. Maxwell leaned slightly toward Callum, whispering something that made him smile. I tried to focus on my beer, but it was impossible to ignore the energy radiating from them. "Aren't you the main crane operator?" Maxwell's deep voice broke my fake concentration. I nodded, surprised to be recognized. "We've been watching your work for weeks. Your precision is impressive." Callum came over, leaning on the counter next to me. Especially with that sensitive load from Tuesday, few would have the necessary control. Something about the way they talked suggested they knew more than they let on. Tuesday's load had been classified, military equipment that required special clearance. "How do you know about that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Maxwell smiled for the first time, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say we have a special interest in people with unique skills." Callum slid a card across the counter. "We have a proposal for you, something that goes way beyond lifting containers." I looked at the card. Geographic coordinates and a time, 11 p.m. "The choice is yours," Maxwell declared, finishing his drink. "But people like you are rare, Ethan. It'd be a shame to waste your potential at the port." They left before I could answer, leaving me with 1,000 questions and a card that felt heavier than any load I'd ever lifted. The coordinates led me to an isolated area of the military base, a deactivated training sector by the sea. Maxwell and Callum were waiting for me in an old command room, with monitors showing thermal images of the port. "Your job has been our perfect cover," Maxwell explained, showing me ship routes I knew all too well. "We need someone who understands movement and precision just like you do." For the next few hours, they introduced me to a hidden world within the base. Callum explained the technical details while Maxwell watched my reactions with clinical interest. I learned about security systems, blind spots in the cameras, and patrol patterns I'd never noticed before. "You've got a unique perspective from up there," Callum commented, his hand occasionally touching my shoulder as he pointed out details on the monitors. "You see things others just can't notice." Maxwell stayed a bit more distant, but his eyes never left me. "Show him the simulator room," he ordered Callum. In an adjacent room, a simulator replicated my exact crane cabin. I demonstrated the maneuvers I performed every day while they watched my every move carefully. "Impressive," Maxwell murmured as he finally stepped closer. "Your sensitivity with the controls, it's almost artistic. It's like an extension of my body," I explained, feeling the warmth of their presence close to the simulator seat. "Every move has to be precise," Callum finished for me, his face close as he observed my movements on the controls. Like a silent dance. The tension in the room kept mounting. The air conditioning seemed insufficient to cool the increasingly charged atmosphere. Maxwell positioned himself on the other side of the seat, his military cologne mixing with Callum's scent. Exactly what we were looking for. Maxwell declared, his voice rougher than usual. My mind was waging a silent battle. Their military professionalism contrasted with the intensity in their gaze. The classified information they were sharing hinted at something bigger and riskier than a simple job offer. "There's an operation in progress," Maxwell revealed, his voice tight. "We need you, but the risk is high." Callum noticed my hesitation. "We understand your reservations, Ethan. It's not an easy decision." The weight of the responsibility was overwhelming. Years of safe routine clashed with a proposal that could change everything, or end it all. Maxwell came closer, his commanding presence ramping up my unease. "Do you have family?" he asked directly. "Not anymore," I replied, thinking of my divorce. "Sometimes fate cuts our ties for a reason," Callum commented, his gaze meeting mine in the reflection of a monitor. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Every breath was laden with expectation. "So, what's the real reason you picked me?" I asked, my voice betraying my apprehension. Maxwell gave an enigmatic smile. "Sometimes, Ethan, the best choices come from instinct." Maxwell's answer hung in the air as he moved toward me, his deliberate steps echoing in the empty room. Callum shut down some monitors, leaving only the blue glow of surveillance screens lighting the space. "Our work demands absolute trust," Maxwell began, his voice low yet firm. "We have to be sure we can rely on you, completely." Callum came up behind my chair, his hands lightly resting on my shoulders. The touch, though professional, sent a jolt up my spine. "Your body language is fascinating," Callum observed, his fingers making almost imperceptible circles. "As controlled as your moves on the crane." Maxwell leaned over the control panel in front of me, his green eyes locked onto mine. "You always keep that level of control, Ethan?" The air in the room grew thicker by the minute. Their proximity was affecting me in ways I hadn't expected. I tried to hold my composure, but my breathing became irregular. "Control's just part of my job," I replied, my voice rougher than normal. "And outside of it?" Maxwell asked, moving even closer. His military cologne mixed with the clean sweat that surrounded him overwhelmed my senses. Callum shifted his hands to ease the tension in my shoulders. "You're too tense, Ethan. You need to relax for our next phase." The way he said phase made my heart race. Maxwell came even nearer, his presence enveloping me. "The question is," he murmured, "are you ready to let go of the reins?" My hands gripped the arms of the chair. Callum's touch grew firmer, more intentional. Maxwell stepped closer still, his face mere inches from mine. "Sometimes," Callum whispered near my ear, "you have to lose control to truly find yourself." The tension reached an unbearable peak. The air conditioning seemed useless against the heat emanating from our bodies. Maxwell's hand reached up to my face, firm yet gentle. "Last chance to back out," he offered, his voice hoarse with contained desire. But backing out was the last thing on my mind. Years of solitude and self-control were falling apart against the intensity of that moment. The partial darkness of the room, the bluish glow of the monitors, and the sound of our heavy breathing all blended into a symphony of anticipation. "I'm not backing down," I replied, my voice barely audible. Maxwell smiled, a predatory smile that made my stomach flip. "Good," he murmured, "because now you're ours." Callum's touch slid down my arms as Maxwell moved even closer. The moment hung like a heavy load on my crane, about to be released. The tension peaked, and I knew there was no turning back. The night was just beginning, and with it, a new realm of discoveries I'd never imagined. The control I once valued was about to be deliberately abandoned in the hands of these two men who, I was starting to see, had planned every bit of this night with the same precision I'd devoted to my work. Every move that followed was like a perfectly executed choreography. Maxwell's experienced hands guided while Callum complemented every gesture with military precision. The command room turned into our private territory, where ranks and hierarchies took on new meanings. Like a meticulously planned operation, they led me to a more secluded area. Moonlight streamed through the high windows, casting dancing shadows across our bodies. Maxwell remained silently in control, his green eyes now darkened by the intensity of the moment. The roughness of his calloused hands contrasted with the controlled smoothness of his movements. Callum, always alert, anticipated every unspoken need. It was like a mission where every detail was studied, every reaction predicted. The temperature among us rose like a swelling wave in the ocean. Our breaths mixed in the dense air of the room. Maxwell set a deliberately slow pace, testing the limits of my self-control. Callum whispered words of encouragement, his husky voice close to my ear. Time seemed suspended, like that crucial moment in a special operation. Every touch, every move, every sigh was executed with the precision of a military maneuver. The intensity grew gradually, like a tide rising inexorably. Maxwell controlled the rhythm with the natural authority of a leader, while Callum made sure every moment was fully savored. They were like two forces of nature, both complementary and equally powerful, taking me to places I'd never explored. The climax built up like an operation reaching its decisive moment. The tension hit almost unbearable levels. Maxwell intensified his moves, his heavy breathing setting the pace. Callum kept a steady support, his strong hands providing stability. When we finally reached the peak, it was like a controlled explosion. Maxwell let out a low, guttural grunt, while Callum murmured words of approval. Pleasure surged through us like a shockwave, leaving us momentarily disoriented. In the silence that followed, only our panting filled the room. Moonlight kept its steady path across the floor, indifferent to the intensity of what had happened. Maxwell was the first to pull himself together, his expression gradually returning to its usual seriousness. Callum handed me water from his military canteen, a simple gesture that brought a sense of normalcy back to the extraordinary moment we'd just shared. The air began to cool on our heated skin, reawakening our awareness of the outside world. The mission had been executed with a precision only trained military could achieve. Every move, every touch, every moment was calculated, even if fueled by undeniable passion. The ensuing silence was comfortable, filled with looks that spoke louder than words. Maxwell adjusted his uniform with the same precision he demonstrated earlier, while Callum discreetly organized the space. It was a night when I learned that sometimes true control lies in knowing when to let go. A lesson I learned not from up on my crane, but in the firm arms of two men who transformed my life with the precision of a perfect military operation. As we regrouped, the weight of what had happened began to settle. Maxwell turned on a single monitor, its blue glow revealing expressions that mixed satisfaction with contemplation. Callum adjusted his uniform flawlessly, as if trying to restore order to a world that had just been turned upside down. "You exceeded our expectations," Maxwell declared, his rough voice returning to a professional tone, though his eyes still held the warmth of the previous moments. "In every way." Callum came over with 3 glasses of water, a simple gesture that carried a deeper meaning. We were equals in that moment, regardless of rank or position. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" I asked, more to myself than to them. "It changes everything, and yet it doesn't," Callum replied, his enigmatic smile back. "The operation is still real. Your involvement is still crucial." Maxwell leaned against the command table, his muscles still visibly tense under his perfectly fitted uniform. "What happened here," he paused deliberately, "was both a test and a confirmation." Reality began to realign in my mind. The encounter wasn't just a moment of passion. It was a demonstration of trust, a proof of loyalty, an unspoken pact. "Did you plan this from the start?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "We planned for every possibility," Maxwell confirmed. "But your response, your surrender, that went beyond our predictions." Callum moved around the room with the feline grace I had come to know well. Some things can't be calculated, only felt. The air between us had changed. It was no longer charged with sexual tension, but with a deep complicity, a mutual understanding that went beyond the physical. "Starting tomorrow," Maxwell continued, his tone assuming that commanding quality, "you'll have access to information few civilians get. Your position at the port stays, but your responsibilities will be expanded. You're not alone in that cabin anymore," Callum added, his hand briefly resting on my shoulder. "Now, you're part of something bigger." The magnitude of the change in my life was beginning to reveal itself. What started as a night of surrender had turned into a new purpose, a new mission. "And what about us?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could hold it back. Maxwell exchanged a look with Callum before answering. "We're a unit now. What happened here stays between us, but it won't be the last time. Consider it an extra benefit of the operation." Callum smiled, his light tone contrasting with the seriousness of the situation. The sun was starting to threaten the horizon, visible through the high windows. Soon I'd return to my routine at the port, but nothing would be the same. Every move of the crane now carried a dual meaning. Every ship observed had an added purpose. Maxwell and Callum hadn't just recruited me for a military operation, they'd recruited me for a life of double duty, where pleasure and duty danced in a complex, satisfying routine. As I prepared to leave, I realized my loneliness had been replaced by something far more valuable. A secret shared with two men who had transformed my life into a mission I could hardly wait to continue. Dawn painted the sky with rosy hues as we left the command room. Maxwell methodically checked every monitor, erasing the traces of our nocturnal presence, while Callum walked me to the discreet exit of the base. "Your shift starts in a few hours," Callum reminded me, checking his military watch. "Stick to your normal routine. Act natural." "How will I know when—" I began to ask, but Maxwell appeared silently behind us, cutting me off. "We'll find you," he stated with his characteristic authority. "For now, just keep watching the port like you always do. But from now on, you'll know what to look for." Callum discreetly slipped a small device into my pocket. "For secure communications," he explained. "Only to be used in emergencies. We prefer face-to-face contact." The double meaning in his words didn't go unnoticed, sending shivers through me with the vivid memory of the night before. Maxwell noticed my reaction, and a slight smile played on his lips. "Your privileged position at the port is crucial," Maxwell continued, his tone professional but his gaze intense. "But your discretion is even more important. No one can suspect any changes in your routine." "And what about you guys?" I asked, knowing the question carried multiple meanings. "We're professionals," Callum replied, his voice softening. "We know how to separate business from pleasure, although sometimes the two can come together harmoniously." Maxwell stepped closer, invading my personal space one last time. "This isn't a goodbye, Ethan. It's just the beginning of something much bigger." The sun was fully rising now, signaling it was time to go. Callum scanned the area with the precision of years of military training. "Clear path," he announced, though his eyes stayed fixed on me. 48 hours, Maxwell declared. "Keep your eyes open and your mind clear. You'll know when it's time to meet up with us again." The promise in his words made my heart race. I nodded, understanding that my life had shifted into a dual mission. One official, visible from the top of my crane, and another secret, shared only between these two men. "See you soon, Ethan," Callum said, his hand lingering on my shoulder a second longer than necessary. Maxwell just nodded, but his green eyes spoke far more than words ever could. In moments, they melted into the shadows of the base, leaving me alone with the sea breeze and thoughts oscillating between excitement and apprehension. I walked back to my trailer, feeling the weight of the device in my pocket, a tangible reminder that the night before wasn't a dream. In a few hours, I'd be back in my crane cabin, seemingly the same operator as always. But now I carried secrets that transformed every move into part of something larger. Every container lifted could be part of a secret operation. Every ship watched might hold mysteries that only the three of us understood. And sometime in the next 48 hours, I'd meet up with Maxwell and Callum again. For what purpose? Mission or pleasure? Only time would tell. Knowing them, it'd probably be a perfectly executed mix of both. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. 3 months passed since that first night. My life turned into a delicate balance between duty and desire, between the crane operator everyone knows and the man few truly understand. Maxwell and Callum kept their word. Our meetings, always unpredictable but meticulously planned, combined the adrenaline of secret operations with the intensity of our personal connection. Every time I get the signal, my heart races knowing another chapter of this extraordinary story is about to begin. From the top of my crane, I now see the port with different eyes. Every move carries a double purpose. Every decision has double the weight. Sometimes, I catch myself smiling when I see 2 Navy officers crossing the pier, knowing that no one else knows what lies behind those impeccably pressed uniforms. The loneliness that once consumed me was replaced by a deep complicity. 3 souls united by secrets, desire, and purpose. Maxwell silently commands our lives, while Callum adds that unpredictable touch that makes everything so thrilling. I learned that sometimes you need to lose control to find your true path, that the most significant moments in life come disguised as coincidences, and that some stories need to remain in the shadows to keep their magic. If you made it this far, you probably understand that blend of anxiety and excitement that comes with every moment of discovery. Every new chapter of this journey surprises me more than the last, and I know many of you have your own stories of encounters that changed your lives. Hit like if you've ever experienced a moment that split your life into before and after. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories that promise to turn up the heat even more. As Maxwell always says, some missions are too important to keep secret. And what about the 3 of us? Well, that's a story for another video. After all, some operations take time to be fully revealed. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this.